This video is a review for a quiz about clauses and conjunctions. A reminder that while you are required to take 2 pages of notes, if you stop a third of the way through the video, you probably will not improve as much as you would have liked to. And please remember that I go over the first quiz at the end of the video. The English language is broken into units called sentences. Every sentence has a subject, a predicate, tense, and expresses a complete thought. Within a sentence, there's another unit called a clause, and sentences could be composed of one clause or up to a whole bunch of clauses. There are 2 different types, but they have one thing in common. Every clause has a subject and a verb. An independent clause, though, can stand by itself as a complete sentence, whereas a dependent clause cannot be a complete sentence by itself. One way to help identify clauses is by tracking the subjects and predicates, but another, for dependent clauses, is remembering that they always start with a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. Examples of subordinating conjunctions: when, while, although, because, since, and there are many more. Relative pronouns include who, which, whose, whom, what, that. Sometimes we will see where, and there's not too many more. That's pretty much the exhaustive list, or at least the ones that are most commonly used. So the last type of clause is a relative clause. This is one kind of dependent clause. It has a subject and verb. It gives more information about a noun, and it must start with a relative pronoun. So the English language is composed in sentences, and sentences are built from clauses. We can then classify sentences based on their clause structure. For example, a simple sentence consists of just one independent clause, such as, Mary had a little lamb. We have a subject, we have a verb, and a direct object. Compound sentences consist of 2 independent clauses. These can be joined by a coordinating conjunction or a punctuation mark, such as a semicolon, colon, or dash. For example, Mary had a little lamb, and its wool was white as snow. Notice we joined these 2 independent clauses with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Mary had a little lamb. Its wool was white as snow. We joined these 2 independent clauses with a semicolon. And very similar in the last one, but we join it with a dash. Complex sentences consist of one independent clause and any number of dependent clauses. For example, Mary went and lamb would go are the subject and verb for each of these clauses. We see the word wherever, which is a subordinating conjunction, at the beginning of that first clause. If I tried to say, wherever Mary went, something is missing. It does not express a complete thought until it is attached to this main clause. Compound complex sentences consist of 2 independent clauses and any number of dependent clauses. In this example, children loved, teacher disapproved, and she told are my subject-verb pairings. The word although functions as a subordinating conjunction. The comma is a clue as to where one clause ends and another begins. The teacher disapproved of lambs, and then again we have another coordinating conjunction here, so joining to the last clause. And because of the briefness of these clauses, some would argue that comma before so is optional. Don't worry, on quizzes we'll always put comma coordinating conjunction. But because I have 2 independent clauses, one of them has a dependent clause attached, the sentence is considered compound complex. So next we're going to do a whole bunch of practice underlining and labeling subjects and predicates in order to classify sentences based on their clause structure. In number 1, vaccine was, that's the only subject and predicate pair. And we see Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin, and we might think these are 2 different nouns or subjects, and that could confuse us into thinking there's another clause, but in fact these are both objects of the preposition by. So we know that this sentence is actually simple because there's only one independent clause. In number 2, we remember that prepositional phrases like of the remotes are never actually the subject of a sentence. The object of the preposition remotes is not what controlled the stereo. One controlled the stereo. Of the remotes describes one. And in the second clause, we have another controlled. These two clauses are joined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So our structure is IC, comma, and IC, which means this is a compound sentence. Number 3, Frederick Douglass was is the first subject-verb pairing. Can you find the next? If you said, who fought, you were right. This is a type of dependent clause called a relative clause, and the whole thing is surrounded by commas, so that gives you a clue. Describes Frederick Douglass. Because there's a dependent clause in the middle of an independent clause, so I guess the structure would be kind of like this, whereas the dependent clause is right in the middle, this is a complex sentence. In number 4, Douglas learned is the subject verb. This comma here can be confusing. It might make us think that the first couple of words here are a separate clause. But actually, this is just modifying Douglas. There is not another subject verb, so this sentence is a single independent clause, and we would call this a simple sentence. In number 5, he spoke and Douglas became are the subject-verb pairings. We see this word after functioning as a subordinating conjunction, because if you try to say, after he spoke at a meeting of the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1841, something is missing. Don't be confused by the prepositional phrases that are all throughout this sentence that make it seem a lot longer than it would be otherwise. He spoke, Douglas became. After makes the first one dependent. All those phrases, or perhaps the object of what Douglas became, are not subjects and verbs. Which means we have a dependent clause, then an independent clause. Complex sentence. In number 17, he raced, he has purchased, and he got are the subject-verb pairings. Where is functioning as a relative pronoun. And this whole relative clause, then, is describing the mall, or the noun preceding it. Notice the coordinating conjunction and the comma that join together these two independent clauses. So I have an independent clause, then a dependent clause, then an independent clause, meaning this is compound complex. I could do more, but let's head over to conjunctions. A conjunction is a word that connects parts of a sentence together. At times, we use conjunctions to connect clauses, which is why we teach these two things together. At other times, we use conjunctions to join together subjects, predicates, objects, prepositional phrases, I should say objects of prepositions within prepositional phrases, and a whole slew of other parts of a sentence. There are 4 types of conjunctions we will be looking at. Coordinating conjunctions connect words, phrases, and clauses of equal ranks. For, and, nor, but, or, yet so, or the fanboys are some examples. In the sentence, I want to buy an ice cream cone, comma, but I have no money, but is a coordinating conjunction. It is used with a comma to join together these two independent clauses, making a compound sentence. Subordinating conjunctions connect two ideas and establishes an order of importance between two clauses. It makes one clause the main clause and another clause the subordinate clause. Examples include words like after, before, because, as, when, until, whereas, whether, while, etc. Sometimes one of the coordinating conjunctions can function in a subordinating way. Here's an example sentence. After I go to the bank, I will have money for the ice cream. I go to the bank is an independent clause, but after I go to the bank is not. So that word makes the first clause subordinate. Next up, a correlative conjunction. And these are pairs of conjunctions that link words, phrases, and clauses together. They function exactly like coordinating conjunctions, and in fact, they use many of the coordinating conjunctions like and, or nor, or but. The difference is they come in pairs. So in addition to that coordinating conjunction, you look elsewhere in the sentence for a word that works together to join those words, phrases, and clauses. For example, in the sentence, I want both syrup and sprinkles on my ice cream, both introduces my first item, syrup, and introduces my second item, sprinkles. The fourth type of conjunction is not a conjunction at all. In fact, it's an adverb that connects words, phrases, and clauses, though. These are kind of like wannabe conjunctions because they don't have the same power. When you use words like also, besides, however, nonetheless, likewise, similarly, or next, you can't just stick a comma in front of it in the same way you would the conjunctions. Instead, we put something like a semicolon, however, comma. Or perhaps we break up the two sentences with a period, and then we start or end one of them with a conjunctive adverb. So we're going to practice underlining and classifying conjunctions, and we will label them C for coordinating, look for one of the fanboys, S for subordinating, look for incomplete thoughts, CR for correlative, look for pairs of conjunctions, fanboys plus something, and CA for conjunctive adverb, look for the semicolons or the periods being used to join together two sentences. In number 1, after is a subordinating conjunction. Notice when the dependent clause comes first, there's a comma between the clauses. Number 2, she didn't want to attend the show, nevertheless she went begrudgingly. We can see this semicolon after show, which is a clue that nevertheless is a conjunctive adverb. 3, the students bolted out the door when the bell rang. The word when here is a subordinating conjunction. But notice when our clause structure is IC, DC, that comma is usually not used. This can make it harder to identify where the one clause ends and another clause begins. If we were still tracking subjects and predicates, though, we would see students bolted, bell rang. And the subordinating conjunction is typically in front of one of the subjects. You'll have to go in front of some of the adjectives, too, or some of the articles like the, and we see it right there. Because is a subordinating conjunction. But is a coordinating conjunction. Either or work together as a correlative conjunction. However is a conjunctive adverb. Notice the usage of the semicolon and the comma. It may be tempting for number 8 to underline nor and think you're done and call that coordinating. But remember, correlative conjunctions come in pairs. While the conjunction for is not exactly common in its usage, notice the comma in front of it and how it's used to join two independent clauses together. This is a coordinating conjunction. For number 10, the clue that though is a conjunctive adverb is the fact that we have to use a period to join together these two complete sentences. In number 11, comma and is a coordinating conjunction. In number 12, but is a coordinating conjunction. In 13, when is a subordinating conjunction. Notice the comma when the dependent clause comes first. For 14, until is a subordinating conjunction. Notice no comma since the dependent clause came second. 15, while is subordinating. 16, however, is a conjunctive adverb. 17, besides is a conjunctive adverb. Notice the fact that we used a period to make this a new sentence. For 18, not only but also are used together as a correlative conjunction. Although is subordinating. Therefore is a conjunctive adverb. When is a subordinating conjunction. Either or work together and are correlative. But is coordinating. Not only but also work together as a coordinating conjunction. However is a conjunctive adverb. And let's end with a review of the first quiz. The directions for the first section were to identify the type of conjunction being used in the sentence. A, coordinating, B, correlative, C, subordinating, or D, conjunctive adverb. In number 1, because I was absent 3 consecutive days last week, my teacher is allowing me to turn in my work after the deadline. Because is used as a subordinating conjunction here. 2. Principal Andrews asked both the captain of the cheerleading squad and the captain of the football team to meet her in the office. Both and correlative. Number 3. The woman at the zoo was clawed by the jaguar. Yet she did cross the safety barricade in an attempt to take a closer picture. Yet is a coordinating conjunction. 4. My mom buys $20 worth of lottery tickets every Friday night. Similarly, my father places a bet on the Super Bowl every January. Similarly here is a conjunctive adverb. 5. I am desperately seeking employment, so I applied at every fast food restaurant within a 10-mile radius. So is a coordinating conjunction. Everyone in the building gasped when the gymnast fell off the balance beam. When is a subordinating conjunction. In the next section, the directions were to identify the structure of the sentence. A, simple, B, compound, C, complex, or D, compound complex. 7. Colin played well, but Andrea received the highest score. This one is compound. Number 8. The dentist examined several weak spots in her teeth and found 3 more cavities. While this entire sentence is one clause, we have multiple predicates. So the dentist examined and found different things. And here is joining together the compound predicates, which mean this is actually a simple sentence. Number 9. I earn an allowance by cutting the grass, washing the dishes, and taking out the garbage. I earn is the subject-verb pair. These gerunds, cutting, washing, taking, are all connected to the preposition by, but there is not an additional subject. Therefore, this is still a simple sentence. 10. I peeled the potatoes while mother shredded the carrots. While is a subordinating conjunction, making this a complex sentence. 11. My baseball uniform tore because I slid into home. So because is another subordinating conjunction, so that part of the sentence would be complex. Uniform tore, I slid. Then there's an additional coordinating conjunction, or that there's a coordinating conjunction that connects to an additional independent clause, we won. That's why this one is compound complex. 12. The apartment complex does not allow pets, but management does allow smoking inside the building. This one is compound. 2 independent clauses are joined together. Complex does allow, management does allow. Sure, there's an adverb not. 13. After the principal addressed the student body, tardies became less of an issue in first-hour classes. This is a complex sentence. After is a subordinating conjunction. Principal addressed, tardies became. 14. Rosa Parks, who refused to move to the back of the bus in 1955, fought back against oppression. Rosa Parks is the subject, fought is the verb. But there's an additional subject and verb inside of this relative clause. And this entire relative clause is telling you about Rosa Parks. Because we have an independent clause with a dependent clause right in the middle of it, this is a complex sentence. The directions for the last section are to identify which types of clauses are being used. We can go to the mall unless you are too busy. Unless begins the dependent clause. A is the answer. 16. Because the subject was very complicated, Brad studied hard. Because makes the first clause dependent. The Statue of Liberty was created by French sculptor Frederic Auguste Bartholdi. The subject verb is Statue of Liberty was. We have an A positive describing which sculptor, but there's not an additional subject verb. This one is just one independent clause. The prepositional phrase might have thrown you off, and the A positive phrase might have thrown you off, or perhaps the complement. Because it was in participle form, it looked a lot like a verb when it was really an adjective. 18. Madeline is from a part of France where few people speak English. Madeline is, people speak. Where is a relative pronoun beginning that dependent clause. A is the answer. The battery was dead, and the gas tank was almost empty. So tank was. Because of this comma conjunction, we are connecting two independent clauses with a coordinating conjunction.